It started with a single post, one tap on a screen, and suddenly the internet erupted. In the middle of a high-profile legal battle, Blake Lively, the actress known for her charming on-screen roles and polished public image, found herself at the center of a storm no PR team could spin away. What she shared online wasn't just controversial. It was personal, dangerous, and, according to the judge presiding over the case, a direct violation of court protocol. The reaction was immediate. Fans were stunned, critics were outraged, and those directly involved in the case were left fearing for their safety. Within hours, hashtags were trending, accusations were flying, and the question everyone wanted answered was simple. Why would she do this? This wasn't a scripted drama. This was real life, with real stakes. And as the courtroom tension spilled into the public sphere, it became clear that Blake's choice wasn't just a small misstep. It was about to become one of the most scrutinized moments of her career. To understand how things spiraled so quickly, we need to rewind, not just a few days, but months before this eruption. Blake Lively had been navigating a turbulent stretch of her career, balancing high-profile projects, public appearances, and an increasingly tense legal dispute. On the surface, she maintained the same composed, graceful image that fans had come to expect. But behind closed doors, the battle lines were already drawn. This wasn't an ordinary disagreement. The case involved multiple parties, sensitive evidence, and strict court-imposed rules meant to protect everyone's privacy and safety. Every word spoken in court, every file submitted, and every name mentioned was treated with a level of caution that bordered on paranoia. Judges in these kinds of cases don't just recommend discretion, they demand it. Violating those boundaries can lead to sanctions, and yet there was an undercurrent of friction. In the months leading up to the infamous post, whispers began circulating online. Some claimed that Blake was frustrated with how slowly the case was moving. Others speculated she felt silenced, boxed in by legal red tape, unable to tell her side of the story. The pressure was building, both in court and in the court of public opinion. Every move she made was watched, dissected, and interpreted. In a world where one Instagram story can reach millions in minutes, the temptation to bypass the slow grind of legal proceedings can be overwhelming. And that's exactly the atmosphere in which the unredacted incident would explode. But before we get to the breaking point, you have to see just how carefully constructed this legal minefield was, and why one wrong step could ignite it all. It was supposed to be routine. Another day of filing legal paperwork, another round of carefully worded statements for the court record. But somewhere in that process, the mistake happened. Blake Lively, perhaps out of frustration, impulse, or a desire to sway public perception, shared a document related to the ongoing case on her social media. At first glance, it looked like a simple piece of evidence, the kind of thing you might expect to see in a tabloid leak. But legal experts quickly noticed something far more serious. The document wasn't properly redacted. Key names, addresses, and private details were visible for anyone who cared to zoom in. These weren't random lines of text. They were the personal identifiers of people directly connected to the case. In a matter of minutes, the information was screenshotted, shared across Twitter, Instagram, and fan forums, and preserved in corners of the internet, where nothing ever truly disappears. To the public, it was a shocking breach of decorum. To those named in the document, it was a potential threat to their safety. And to the court, it was a blatant violation of orders that had been repeated over and over since the case began. Within hours, the legal team for the opposing side filed an emergency motion, demanding immediate action. The post was deleted, but the damage was done. People had already downloaded the file, dissected every visible word, and spread the details to every gossip site willing to touch the story. And as much as Blake's PR team tried to frame it as an unintentional oversight, the court wasn't buying it. The judge wanted answers, and he wasn't in the mood for celebrity excuses. When the court reconvened, the atmosphere was icy. The presiding judge, a man known for his no-nonsense approach and razor-sharp memory, wasted no time addressing the elephant in the room. From the moment Blake stepped into the courtroom, it was clear this wasn't going to be a gentle warning or a quiet behind-the-scenes scolding. This was going on the record. The judge began by laying out the facts. A document that should have been heavily redacted was made public. The unredacted version contained the names and personal details of individuals the court had explicitly ordered be protected. This, he reminded the room, wasn't a grey area. It was a direct violation of a standing court order, one Blake had personally acknowledged in writing. He didn't stop there. Looking directly at her, the judge made it clear that celebrity status had no place in his courtroom. Whether you were an Oscar winner or an unknown defendant, the rules were the same. His tone carried the weight of someone who'd seen too many high-profile figures try to bend legal boundaries with charm or influence. And he wasn't about to let that happen here. In an unflinching statement, he ordered Blake to immediately remove any trace of the post, issue a written apology to the court, and refrain from sharing any case-related information online moving forward. He also warned that any future breach, intentional or not, could result in contempt charges, meaning fines, restrictions, or even time behind bars. The silence that followed was thick. Blake's attorneys nodded in compliance, but the damage to her reputation inside that courtroom was already done. The judge's words weren't just a reprimand. They were a shot across the bow, a message that this case was no longer just about the original dispute. It was now about whether one of Hollywood's most beloved stars could follow the same rules as everyone else. If the courtroom reprimand was the spark, the internet was the wildfire. Within hours of the hearing, news outlets had picked up the story. Headlines like "Judge Scolds, Blake Lively for dangerous leak," and "Lively in contempt" began circulating on every major entertainment site. Gossip blogs dissected every facial expression she made in court, speculating on whether her downcast eyes meant guilt, defiance, or just fatigue. But the real chaos wasn't in the headlines. It was in the comment sections. Fans were split right down the middle. On one side were the loyal defenders, claiming she had simply made a mistake, and that the media was blowing it out of proportion. On the other side were critics who accused her of weaponizing her platform, using public exposure as a way to intimidate or discredit those involved in the case. Social media algorithms, sensing the drama, pushed the story into trending lists worldwide. Twitter threads analyzed every screenshot of the now deleted post, circling names in red and debating whether Blake had done it intentionally. TikTok creators jumped in with explainers that racked up millions of views, many of them laced with outrage. Then came the secondary wave. People began digging into her past public disputes, re-uploading old interviews and moments where she had clashed with the press or pushed back against unfair narratives. Suddenly, the unredacted incident wasn't just a one-time slip-up. It was part of a much bigger conversation about celebrity responsibility and the ethics of public platforms. For those named in the leaked document, this wasn't just an online drama. Some reportedly received harassing messages and threats from strangers who had taken the leak as an invitation to investigate them. The privacy breach had real-world consequences, and the court's warnings about safety were starting to look painfully prophetic. And as the noise reached a deafening level, the conversation shifted toward a larger question. Was this incident a one-off or part of a repeating pattern of behavior? For many casual observers, this whole mess might have seemed like an isolated mistake. But for those who had been following Blake Lively's public disputes over the years, the unredacted incident felt eerily familiar. This wasn't the first time her name had been linked to controversies involving personal boundaries and information control. Back in 2018, she made headlines for a fiery exchange with paparazzi over photos of her children, calling out media outlets for invading her family's privacy. Most fans praised her for that, but detractors pointed out that she also had a history of strategically releasing personal details when it benefited her narrative. In 2020, during a tense legal battle involving a former business associate, confidential details mysteriously leaked to entertainment reporters. While Blake's team denied involvement, the timing raised eyebrows. Some in the industry quietly speculated that she understood exactly how to weaponize publicity, a skill that could be as dangerous as it was effective in the wrong hands. Legal experts watching this new incident noted that it didn't exist in a vacuum. Judges and lawyers remember patterns, especially in high-profile cases. If you've previously skirted the edge of what's permissible, even unintentionally, it becomes harder to convince anyone that the next breach is purely accidental. The court wasn't just reacting to the unredacted file, it was reacting to a history, a body of moments where Blake had demonstrated a willingness to push boundaries in the name of control. And in this instance, that history worked against her. This framing wasn't lost on the media either. Opinion pieces began popping up with headlines like "Blake Lively, bad luck or calculated risk," and "When privacy activists become privacy violators." The narrative was shifting, painting her less as an unlucky celebrity caught in a PR nightmare, and more as someone who might have been playing a long, dangerous game. And that's where the conversation took a darker turn, because the stakes weren't just about embarrassment anymore. They were about safety. For the people whose names appeared in that unredacted document, this wasn't about gossip, drama, or even legal strategy. It was about survival. Almost immediately after the post went live, some of the individuals involved began receiving direct messages from strangers. At first, it was questions. Then it escalated to threats. A few even reported being followed or having their workplaces contacted by people claiming they were doing their own investigation. What had been protected under the court's confidentiality order was now exposed to millions, and there was no way to put the genie back in the bottle. Legal analysts pointed out that doxing, the act of publicly revealing private information, can have devastating consequences, even if the intent wasn't malicious. In some cases, victims have been forced to change phone numbers, move residences, or alter their daily routines. And unlike a one-time insult or rumor, personal information, once leaked, is permanent. Screenshots get saved, files get copied. It's a bell you can't unring. The judge had made it crystal clear during earlier proceedings why those redactions existed in the first place: to protect people from harassment, intimidation, and potential harm. By posting the unredacted material, even for a short period of time, Blake had effectively removed that shield, knowingly or not. For the court, this wasn't just about punishing a breach of procedure. It was about reinforcing the principle that legal protections aren't optional, and they exist for reasons that sometimes only become obvious when it's too late. For the public, it served as a reminder of something more uncomfortable. When celebrities make missteps online, the fallout often lands hardest on people who aren't famous, who don't have teams of lawyers, and who can't command a media narrative to clean up the mess. The growing safety concerns set the stage for the judge's next move, a series of continued warnings that made it clear this was far from over. By the time the next hearing rolled around, the tension in the courtroom was thick enough to cut with a knife. Everyone, reporters, legal teams, even the bailiff, seemed to know this wasn't going to be a routine update. The judge wasted no time. As soon as Blake Lively took her seat, the lecture began. This wasn't the clipped, restrained scolding of the first incident. This was sharper, more deliberate, and aimed not just at correcting her behavior, but at making a public example out of her. "Ms. Lively," the judge began, voice firm but controlled, "I have already explained the importance of redactions in this case. That explanation was not optional. It was an order. When those protections are ignored, even briefly, it jeopardizes the safety of real people. This court will not tolerate that." He reminded her, and the entire room, that future violations would not simply be met with warnings. They could lead to contempt charges, fines, or even restrictions on her ability to publicly comment about the case at all. In extreme scenarios, the court could consider sanctions that would directly affect her legal standing. Blake sat quietly, her hands clasped on the table, occasionally glancing toward her attorneys. The cameras in the back of the room caught every flicker of emotion, from the tight-lipped composure to the quick, almost imperceptible swallow when the judge mentioned contempt. For the media, this moment was gold. Clips of the warning made the rounds on every major outlet, with captions like "Judge lowers the boom" on Lively and "Next step, contempt of court." The public could sense that the situation had shifted. The judge wasn't just reacting anymore. He was laying down the law for what came next. Time court adjourned. One thing was certain. Blake's every move in this case would now be under a microscope, both legally and in the court of public opinion. And in Hollywood, sometimes the latter is far more ruthless. From here, all that remained was to step back, look at the bigger picture, and ask the one question that had been hanging in the air since the very beginning. What does this mean for her career, her reputation, and the people caught in the crossfire? When the dust settles, this case won't just be remembered for the legal battle at its core. It will be remembered for the moment a Hollywood star stood in front of a judge and learned in real time that fame is not a shield against accountability. Blake Lively's on-screen charm and polished public image may have carried her through countless interviews, premieres, and press tours, but inside a courtroom, the rules are different. There's no PR spin that can undo an official record. There's no glossy magazine cover that can replace the cold, hard weight of a judicial warning. The unredacted post may have been a single action, a momentary lapse, or even an honest mistake, but its ripple effects revealed a truth that is both unglamorous and unavoidable. The law is designed to protect people, and when you break that protection, even accidentally, the consequences are real and irreversible. For the people whose names were exposed, this wasn't a plot twist in a celebrity scandal. It was a breach of safety, a disruption of their lives, and in some cases, a threat to their well-being. For the judge, it was a test of whether the court could enforce its orders without fear or favoritism. And for the public, it was a rare, unfiltered glimpse into how quickly celebrity actions, amplified by millions of followers, can turn into very real, very human consequences. As the cameras packed up and the headlines rolled out, one thing became crystal clear. No matter how many awards you've won, how many red carpets you've walked, or how many fans flood your social media, when you're standing before the bench, there's only one role you play: defendant. And in that role, the only script that matters is the one the judge is reading. Because in court, it's not about who you are, it's about what you did, and the ending isn't written in applause. It's written in orders, rulings, and consequences that follow you long after the cameras stop rolling.